Hello Nidorinas and Nidorinos, I'm KingNido, and today it is the Olivine Raiders going up against the Cinnabar Blazes in our major semi-final of Victory Road in the PokeType League TCG Season A2. But let's have a look at this tale of the tape between these two sides. The Olivine Raiders were able to bypass the first two games of Victory Road to have this major semi-final that could get them straight into the Champions game, but to do so they're going to have to take down the Cinnabar Blazes, who were the first team to ever defeat them in the PokeType League TCG. So with that said, let us know in the comments below who you think is going to win. Will it be the metal decks? Will it be the fire decks? Let's go!
3, 2, 1, go!
And going first, it will be the Cinnabar Blazes, moving their Paldean Taurus from their Flamethon deck. They are going up against the Mining Melancholy deck of the Olivine Raiders, who move their Morwhile into the active spot. Both these sides only having one basic Pokemon that they lay out on the field. There is a second Paldean Taurus though in the hand of the Cinnabar Blazes, and they do pull the Rocky Helmet, but they've got that Professor's Research, so they're able to immediately get two more cards. They get the Houndour, another basic Pokemon, plus the Giant Cape, another Pokemon tool. They've got the Rapidash as well, but they do lay out that Rocky Helmet onto the Paldean Taurus, and they put the Houndour on the bench. They want to make the Olivine Raiders reluctant to go on the offensive, as they also lay out that second Paldean Taurus, but the Raiders are going to pull their Registeel here, and they immediately move that onto the bench. They do not want an empty bench, because if they lose an active Pokemon with an empty bench, they will immediately lose this first game, and that is not what they want to happen. Now, normally it is a best of 3 series, but inside of Victory Road, it is much different. You need all 3 decks to win. You need all 3 decks to win to move on, and moving on here will mean you are going on to our Champions game, as that Iron Beam Breaker does get 20 damage onto the Taurus, but there is that 20 recall. The Blazers pull a Ponyta, and as we said, they've got the Rapidash in hand, so they're not worried about actually setting up that Paldean Taurus in the active spot. Instead, they're going to get an energy onto the Ponyta, as it is now the Varoom being pulled for the Olivine Raiders, and again, they get another Pokemon onto their bench. They've only got 1 bench slot remaining, as they've got 2 potions, a Dawn, and an X-Speed in hand, and they do use one of those potions to immediately get the Morwhile back to full strength whilst they're just trying to chip away at the Taurus. The Registeel getting its first of 3 required energy. But this time they choose not to go on the offensive, as the Blazers pull their Houndoom as well, so they can evolve this Houndour as we see taking place now. They can also evolve this Ponyta if they want to get the Rapidash online. Rapidash does require 2 energy, and so does Houndoom. Houndoom with that corner that causes the opposing Pokemon to not be able to retreat. Rapidash with that Rising Lunge that does 40 damage. With a coin flip though, if it gets heads, it does an additional 60, and the Olivine Raiders are weak to the fire type, so they have that to contend with, as well as the second Varoom is pulled for the Raiders. They're going to retreat the Morwhile with the X-Speed, bringing that retreat cost to 0. They keep the energy on the Morwhile, moving that Registeel with its second energy onto that active spot, but they play the Dawn. This is going to allow them to move an energy from Morwhile to Registeel, so now it can actually move and go on the offensive with this Metal Claw, taking Paldean Taurus out of this match. It is moved into the discard pile, and the Raiders take the first point here in Game 1. When they went up against the Cinnabar Blazes earlier in this season, not only was it their first loss, it was a clean sweep defeat. There was nothing they could do to stop the Cinnabar Blazes, and the Blazers are coming off a clean sweep victory, and they want to ride this momentum into the Champions game, as it is the Iono that they pull. They've moved the Houndoom into the active spot, and with this corner it will prevent the Registeel from being able to retreat, but it does 80 damage. Registeel still has 10 health remaining, so it can get 90 damage off onto the Houndoom, as the Raiders pull their own Professor's Research, which they do play, getting them the Reverum plus their second Morwhile, and they do have that Varoom on the bench, so they are going to evolve it with that Spinning Drift. It also requires 3 energy, but here's the Metal Claw on the Houndoom, bringing it down to only 10 health remaining. The Reverum does 70 damage, but it is a coin flip, and if it flips heads, it prevents all damage done to it in the next turn. That could be crucial for this Game 1. And the Blazers pull their second Rapidash, but they get that second energy onto the Rising Lunge Rapidash, and they're playing the X-Speed. They want to retreat the Houndoom. They don't want to drop a second point here. They do bring it back. They're moving the Rapidash into the active spot, who's still at full strength. Now all it needs to do is do the Rising Lunge to take out the Registeel. The coin flip will just be for added damage, and that additional damage is going to take place. It's going to do 120 with that weakness coming into play. Not that it counts toward the leaderboard anymore. They are now in Victory Road. That is just just added measure, they are trying to put the pressure here on this Mining Melancholy deck, who do move the Mawile into the active spot. They don't want another Rising Lunge to get a coin flip heads, but it is the Adamant being pulled for the Raiders as they're trying to set up this Reverroom here. Now, Adamant can be played, it is a Pokemon supporter, but what it does is it reduces the damage that the metal types take by 20 in the next turn, which would not be enough to keep that Mawile safe either, as the second Houndour is pulled for the Cinnabar Blazes. They're going to start getting energy onto the Paldean. It does require 3, but here is another Rising Lunge with the capability of doing 60, but we did just set to 120, and it will do 120 again. Mawile is wiped off the board, being moved into the discard pile, and this Flameathon deck has just taken full control of Game 1 over the Olivine Raiders. Now, the Cinnabar Blazes' last victory road in Season A1, they were unable to win a series, and they are trying to dominate here right now. As we said, they got a clean sweep last round, and they're trying to take Game 1 here over the Olivine Raiders. It is the Giant Cape put onto the Reverroom that will keep it safe from being taken off the board, but they also play the Adamant to reduce the damage, and they're going to go with that third energy, the Spinning Drift, 70 damage onto the Rapidash. They need to flip the heads. And they flip the tails, which means Reverroom is susceptible to damage on this coming turn. The Blazers pulling their second Professor's Research. They play immediately, they get 2 more cards, they get a Pokeball, they get a Pokemon Center Lady. Now, they can't use a Pokemon Center Lady because they've already played that supporter card, being the Professor's Research. 1 supporter card per turn, same as it's only 1 Pokemon tool can be attached to each Pokemon. And it is the second Ponyta being pulled. They immediately move that onto the bench as well, but they're continuing to set up the Taurus. It can do 80 damage. It does get 10 recoil damage with that Blaze Tackle, but it is the Rising Lunge, and it's another heads, another 120 damage from, sorry, only 100 damage. It would have been 120, but that Adamant did come into play, leaving Reverroom with 30 health remaining as they pull their second Reverroom, and they immediately get that online on the bench, but it's got no energy currently. So the Raiders are greatly limited. They're going to get a potion on to this Reverroom. Now, they can take out this Rapidash, but the crucial part that they need from the Reverroom is for it to flip the head so it can't be eliminated in the next turn. And it's the tails. This is not what the Raiders needed in Game 1. They do get their second point. The next point will win Game 1, but the Blazers in full control move the Paldean Taurus into the active spot. It just needs 1 more energy. They pull the Houndoom. That's not what they're concerned with. They're concerned with getting the victory here in Game 1, and with this Blaze Tackle, 100 damage onto the Reverroom for this Flameathon deck to get the first game victory. And as we have our first table reset, if you're enjoying what you're seeing, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe so you never miss the action from the PokeType League TCG, especially whilst we're here in Victory Road of Season A2. Now, it is the Raiders going first this time. This time, they're going to be using their Stark Mountain deck, going up against the Cinnabar Blazes Fire Spit Island deck, and both of these decks have got their Heatrans. The Blazers, having both already in hand, get them onto the board. It is the Magnemite for the Raiders, but they do have a Pokeball in hand, as well as the Potion, Rocky Helmet, and Pokemon Communication, but they do pull their own Heatran, and they do play the Pokeball as well. That does get them the Skarmory. Now, Skarmory is crucial with those Pokemon tools. It does have those metal arms, although it actually has metal wings. At least they look like wings to me. Where it does 20 damage, but if a Pokemon tool is attached to it, it does an additional 30. They lay out both the Skarmory and the Heatran as the Blazers pull their Vulpix, and they are going to play the Pokeball as well, getting their second Vulpix. And if you're wondering why cards from A1 sets are in the Cinnabar Blazes decks, it's because they didn't have enough fire types in the Space-Time Smackdown, Triumphant Light, and Shining Revelry sets to create full sizes. They require 3 evolutionary lines per deck. They do get their first energy onto their Heatran, but it requires 2, so they send it back over to the Raiders, who pull the Magneton. And they are going to, they think of getting the Magneton online, and they would want to, because Heatran, even with that Rage and Mad Strike only doing 40 damage, with the weakness, it would wipe that Magnemite off the board, so they intelligently get the Magneton on the line here. They need to be careful though. With this Rocky Helmet, they are going to get it onto the Magneton, but if Heatran's taken any damage, that Rage and Mad Strike does an additional 40. However, they are going to get an energy onto Magneton. It can't go on the offensive yet. That rolling attack does require 2 energy. As the Blazers do pull Professor's Research, they play that immediately as expected, getting their own Pokemon Communication and their second Magmortar now in hand. They're going to play the Pokemon Communication though. And they are going to send one of those Magmortars back into the deck to get a different Pokemon card, and it's the Ninetales that they are able to get. And they've already got a Vulpix on the bench that's now just been evolved into the Ninetales as the second energy onto the Heatran, who gets its own Rocky Helmet attached as well. And for now, this Raging Mad Strike will only do 60 damage thanks to that weakness coming into play of the Metal types. But there's that 20 recoil damage onto the Heatran. That Raging Mad Strike can now do 80 damage. And again, those weaknesses, although Skarmory is actually weak to the Lightning types, that could be crucial for the Raiders here. So they get a second energy onto the Magneton. They are going to use their own Pokemon communication to send the Heatran back into the deck. They get a Magnemite now. I'm sure they probably wanted a Magnezone, but here with this rolling attack, it will do 30 damage to the Heatran. But that Rocky Helmet that Heatran's wearing is going to do 20 damage back to Magneton, leaving it with only 10 health remaining. As it does come back over to the Cinnabar Blazes, they get their second Ninetales. Those flamethrowers requiring 2 energy to do 90 damage are huge. They do have to discard energy when that happens, but here's the Raging Mad Strike now doing 80 damage plus the additional for the weakness. Magneton is wiped off the board into the discard pile, and the Blazers with this Fire Spit Island deck take the first point here of game 2. Now, as expected, we can have a maximum of 5 games here inside Victory Road to complete a series, unless we actually have tie games, and that can extend them even further. But the Raiders do pull their second Skarmory with a Skarmory in the active spot. With the Metal Arms, they don't have a Pokemon tool on it, so it only does 20 damage. It takes 20 recoil as well. From the Rocky Helmet, the Blazers pull a Giant Cape. The Raiders desperately need a Pokemon tool on those Skarmories that would have been able to take out that Heatran otherwise, as the Blazers are setting up their Ninetales both with an energy each and 80 damage from the Heatran to take the Skarmory, and already the Blazers have got their second point here in game 2. And this is not looking good for the Raiders right now. They've never defeated one of the Cinnabar Blazes decks, and it's looking like they may have to try and do it 3 times in a row if this keeps up here in game 2. They do pull their their Magnezone. They get an energy onto the Skarmory. Those Metal Arms finally get the Heatran off the board. There's the Rocky Helmet recoil damage. Skarmory with 60 health remaining. It is an easy target, as the Raiders have just taken their first point for either of these two Ninetales, and they do select one from the bench, moving it into the active spot. Ninetales, they pull the Dawn. Ninetales, though, only requires 1 energy here to go on for this Flamethrower, having the 2 energy that are required attached, and 90 damage, wiping the Skarmory off the board, taking down this Stark Mountain deck. And now the Fire Spit Island deck has gotten over the line. They just need their Flint Lockwood deck to get a win to move on to the Champions game, as we get another table reset here for game 3. This time it's the Cinnabar Blazers going first. We know they're going to use that Flint Lockwood deck, and they've got the Slugma and the Sizzlipede in hand. They have got a Center Scorch as well, but they're going with the Slugma in the active spot, the Sizzlipede on the bench. The Olivine Raiders again going with the Stark Mountain deck, and now they've got the Skarmory that they move into the active spot with the Magnemite on the bench. They have got a Magnezone, but no Magneton in hand just yet. But here we go for game 3 for the Blazers. This could move them into the Champions game. The Raiders need to win 3 games straight. And the Blazers pull their second Center Scorch, so there's not much they can do, so they just send it over to the Raiders, who already get that Magneton in hand. They get an energy onto the Skarmory, but still no Pokemon tool in hand to attach to one of these Skarmories, just like in the previous game. So it's only 20 damage onto the Slugma. The Blazers do pull their Heat Rotom, and they are going to get that online. It does require 2 energy, whereas the Slugma with this Flare only requires 1, and they're going to play the Pokemon Center Lady. They want to keep it at full strength. They don't want to put it at risk of those Metal Arms doing 50 damage, but this Flare will only do 20 to the Skarmory, chipping away at its health there. And speaking of Flare, it's fitting that the Cinnabar Blazers have Pokemon that do the move Flare, because in our PokeType League VGC over on our other channel, they have the Lava Ridge Flare that is our Fire-type team. But whilst I'm promoting that, the Raiders move their Heatran that they just pulled onto the bench, as well as getting that Magneton online and getting an energy onto it. Another 20 damage onto the Slugma from the Skarmory here. And the Blazers pull in their potion, so they can actually restore even more health for this Slugma, getting it back to full strength once again after using that Pokemon Center Lady. And it is the Sizzlipede getting its first energy. They can get these Center Scorches online, but they require 4 energy for those Fire Blasts, as the Flare continuing to just chip away at this Skarmory. Another 20 damage as the Raiders pull their own potion. They still don't have a Pokemon tool to attach this Skarmory, but they have the Magnezone now online. However, Magnezone does require 3 energy for that power beam. They just use the potion on the Skarmory. They've got a Pokemon Center Lady as well that they could use, but they're just continuing with the Metal Arms from the Skarmory as they get a second energy onto the Magnezone here, and the Blazers are going to pull the Rocky Helmet, so they get a Pokemon tool before the Raiders do, and the Raiders have 3 Pokemon tools. Most decks in Season A2 only have 2 Pokemon tools inside their decks as that Sizzlipede gets its second energy, and now they're going to get the Center Scorch online. They've also got the Team Rocket Run if they hope to get the energy off the opposing Pokemon, but I don't think they're too concerned with the Skarmory having the 1 energy. I think it's the Magnezone that the Blazers are concentrating on. But finally, the Olivine Raiders pull the Soul Lumberry that's not just in this deck, but in the whole PokeType League TCG Season A2, and they do get it onto the Skarmory, which means finally they can go on the offensive and do 50 damage instead of just 20. They do play the Pokemon Center Lady, bringing Skarmory's health up to 70, and this Metal Arms will now be enough to take the Slugma off the board as they take the first point here in Game 3. There is that 20 recall damage, however, from the Rocky Helmet. The Blazers don't have enough energy on that Center Scorch yet, so they choose to move the Heat Rotom into the active spot. They pull their second Slugma, still having not pulled a Macargo that is somewhere in that deck. They do get a third energy onto the Center Scorch, and they think of moving, and they do move the Slugma onto the bench. There's not a great deal else they can do this turn, however. The Blazers thinking about what they can do. They are so close to potentially moving on to this Champions game after being eliminated from Victory Road last season in straight sets. The Raiders pulling their second Skarmory, but now they're going to start setting up the Heat Train after having set up that Magnezone, and they're going to retreat the Skarmory. They want to go on the offensive with the Magnezone. They don't want to give the Center Scorch any time to be set up, but that Power Beam takes the Heat Rotom off the board. The Raiders get their second point. They need 1 more point to get this deck over the line. This is crucial. However, the Blazers only need 1 energy on this Center Scorch. 130 damage with that Fire Blast. They do pull a Pokeball, and we need to keep in mind there is that weakness that both Magnezone and Heatran have. They will take an additional 20 damage. It is the Heat Rotom, though, that is pulled from the Blazers deck after using that Pokeball, and there's the 4th energy onto the Center Scorch with this Fire Blast, and it doesn't just do 130 damage. Again, that weakness coming into play, 150 damage. The Magnezone wiped off the board. The Cinnabar Blazes with this Flint Lockwood deck have just taken their first point in Game 3. They're looking to bring it back and just clean sweep the Olivine Raiders once again, who do move that Skarmory with the Lumberry into the active spot. They do pull a potion, but we know that potion won't do much to keep Skarmory safe from 130 damage. The Metal Arms 50 damage onto the Center Scorch here, and it is the second Sizzlipede being pulled for the Cinnabar Blazes, but that 4th energy being reattached to the Center Scorch because it has to discard 1 every time it uses this Fire Blast, and again another point for this Flint Lockwood deck. This is looking terrible for the Raiders because the Center Scorch was afforded the time to be set up. They do move the Skarmory now into the active spot. They do pull the Magnezone, and this is terrible for the Olivine Raiders. They did not want to face the Cinnabar Blazes in this game, and at this rate they're going to be going to the preliminary final. They will get a second chance, and they'll be facing the winner of the Turffield Ebonies and the Petalburg Razors. But the Cinnabar Blazers, as this Center Scorch takes 20 damage from the Metal Arms, the Cinnabar Blazers are blazing literally through Victory Road A2. They pull the Cyrus, but they're not concerned with that. They're concerned with going on to the Champions game, and with another Fire Blast, another 130 damage. They have clean swept the Olivine Raiders for the second time this season. They are in full control heading into that Champions game. But with that said, Nidorinos, thank you so much for watching. Let us know in the comments below what you thought the best card was, and if you enjoyed what you saw, please leave a like, share, subscribe, but more importantly, always remember, send thanks, and I'll see you when you see me.